Hi, my name is Celine Tran, and I'm a second year at the Idaho College of Osteopathic Medicine, and you're listening to Do or Do Not. On today's episode, we will be speaking with Dr. John Thurman. Dr. Thurman is a family medicine physician who attended medical school at A.T. Still University Kirksville College of Osteopathic Medicine and completed his residency training at the MacNeal Memorial Hospital in 2015. Dr. Thurman's history of leadership, however, predates his career in medicine. Before he attended medical school, Dr. Thurman attended West Point, the United States elite military academy. While at West Point, he commanded a company at Buckner and was on a battalion staff during the academic year. Dr. Thurman played football in college where he led the scout team. In 2003, Dr. Thurman was deployed to Kuwait and later Iraq. When Dr. Thurman returned to the U.S., he took a position in admissions at West Point where an unfortunate accident, although leading to hardship, put him on a direct path to become a community leader as a family practitioner in Iowa. Dr. Thurman speaks on his views of minority physicians, specifically African Americans in medicine, and provides insight to help others on their own personal journey.
Dr. Thurman, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Hey, thank you for having me on. This is an awesome opportunity to reach out and talk to aspiring DOs.
Is it okay for the interview if I call you John?
That's completely fine. Actually, that's awesome. Yep.
All right, John, that's great. So usually the way we start the interview, now actually I'm gonna start a little different, but usually we start by just asking about your day, which I'm gonna ask you about in a second. But just for the listeners, the way that I got in contact with you is Margaret Wilson, who is the dean, at Kirksville. I asked her for some people that might be great to interview, and you were the first name that she gave me.
No, that's cool.
Yeah, she was like, John Thurman, start with him. So that's great. And I listened, and I'll tell our listeners that they should check it out on the Kirksville website. Dr. Thurman gave a speech for Black History Month, and it's inspiring and great.
There's a podcast that I did for Guards Down. It's a group that was started by a West Point classmate or a West Point colleague of mine that is for soldiers and for people that have experienced PTSD and complicated grief. And it explores PTSD, suicide, major depression, and trying to get those people to get help, essentially, and letting people know that I'm not the only one that has it. And so we did a good little podcast on how we address that and my own personal issues and then how I deal with that as a physician. So it's on YouTube and it's called Guards Down. Yeah, it's a good little podcast.
I am definitely going to listen to it, John. And I just have to say, I think, and obviously we're going to hear your story, but for me, when I listen to you speak, a lot of your strengths are that you're not scared or, you don't have a problem talking about some of the tough times that you've been through and, maybe some weaknesses, which obviously we all have, but sometimes we're too insecure to talk about them. So I think that sounds amazing. The podcast sounds great.
I think it's my greatest strength is my weakness and my failures.
That's amazing. Yeah. And I think that's something that we've shown through a lot of our podcasts, and I appreciate that. So John, can you just start again? I just want to hear a little bit for our listeners. You're a family practice physician. Can you tell us a little bit about when you started up in the morning, what your day looked like, what you did today, or what you do on a regular day, and maybe some things that highlighted today specifically?
Okay, not a problem. So it's an interesting question because last week, actually, I was inspired by my day, and I actually wrote a fairly long Facebook post about what transpired that day because it was such the family medicine experience. It was such an osteopathic family medicine experience. Take today, for instance, I'm a hospice medical director. So I get up 5 a.m. First thing I do is I get on my Peloton. I pound it out for an hour and a half. And then I had a 7 o'clock hospice meeting. I also had an office meeting that was also happening simultaneously at 7:30. But I took priority covering for my partner for the hospice meeting. So I was kind of doing 2 meetings at once. First patient was roomed at 8:30 and off in a way that I went. And it's, you see everything from just a guy in his 50s refereeing football game, pulled a hamstring, to just some of the more interesting things that I did. I saw this stoic little 9-year-old for a well child check. Go through that and fairly uneventful, uncomplicated. Then I moved on to seeing one of my patients that I've gotten to know very well. And it's the first time that I'm seeing her since her husband passed. And her husband passed maybe about 3.5 weeks ago. And he was very close to me, had a lot of complicated medical issues. And this is how we got to know each other very well. So I knew that this was going to be an emotional experience. And it was. And we went there. It's COVID-19. We're being safe. Everyone's wearing masks. But there were hugs involved, and there were tears, actually probably on my side compared to her side. And she's a widow, and it's just a very emotion. So then, you see that patient, and then the very next patient, I'm seeing upper back pain. And so I did OMT. I actually did, I do OMT in my practice. I think that's another one of my strengths. I'm not afraid to do it. And I went through and did a technique that I actually learned from a mentor of mine in Wichita, who was a DO, but was a chiropractor before he became a DO. And I did a couple of rotations with him as a medical student in Wichita, Kansas. And so I got to work on her and get that immediate satisfaction and that relief. And then I see my favorite set of twins that were delivered June 4th, 2019. And if we get there, I'll tell you about 2019 and how that's been a defining year for me, medically speaking. But I saw them, the twins, twin A did really well. Twin B did not do so well. And so had to use neonatal resuscitation. Mom was really sick, who was actually a friend of mine. And so seeing them 15 months later today, and they're just wanting to play, we're running down the hallway with each other and playing. And then there's diabetes, and then there's high blood pressure that I'm dealing with, and then there's coronary artery disease, and then there's obesity, and then there's the guy I diagnosed with diabetes 6 weeks ago. And I'm able to see he's already lost 16 pounds. And so I'm trying to plant the seeds of how can I get this guy to continue to take advantage of this early success and see and realize that this can be carried out further on. So I used my father-in-law as an example. And my father-in-law I diagnosed last August 2019 with diabetes, an A1C of 7.1. John, what can I do to not take medicine? What can I do? I don't want to take medicine. All right, well, we need to change how we eat. We need to get away from all of this processed food. We need to focus on a more whole food, plant-based diet, exercise. He's like, okay, I'm going to do it. Father-in-law lost 60 pounds in pretty quick time. I'd say 3.5, 4 months, and very serious, very focused. Kept it off. And he's kind of a little thing of a motivation. I actually set him as my cover photo on Facebook last night. He came to visit for Labor Day, and there's a crooked street, kind of like Lombard Street in San Francisco, like one of the crookedest streets in the world. And it's because they had to use the horse carriages, and that's how they got the buggies up and down these streets with these elevations. And so we have that here where I'm at in Burlington, Iowa. It's called Snake Alley. They do a lot of famous bike races and different types of races that go up this. And he wanted to run up it. He's 69. Wow. And so we did 2 days in a row. And he's, we got video of him, and he's just ready to go, and I'm running with him. And, so I try to motivate that patient with the diabetes 6 weeks ago. I say, we'll see you again in 6 weeks. We'll check an A1C. So, oh gosh. And then there's we got a crisis situation with hospice. And so in the middle of seeing patients, my nurse is telling me that hospice, there's a new patient that's an admit and some things fell through the crack. Will you take the patient and care for them? Of course. So it's just a little bit of everything that's hitting you. I think, this particular day that I chronicled the ups and downs, seeing 25 patients, having meetings, dealing with all of the messages that come through. I'm in a very, very busy practice. And I'll tell you the best moment of the day was one of my first babies that was born here. I think she was my second baby when I started as an attending. And she's 4. And she loves to tell me that she's 4, and she's not afraid of me. And that her dad asked, do you remember Dr. Thurman? She's like, of course I remember Dr. Thurman. And after the visit, we laugh and giggle, and she's listening to her brother's heart, and he's listening to her, his sister's heart, and it's all great. And I'm leaving out of the room to go to see the next patient, and she comes out of the hallway, and she waves at me, and she makes a little heart symbol with her hands and starts pumping. And I just completely melted. I was just like, so that's more or less a typical day for Dr. Thurman. And so then I came home, I see my wife. I get home 4:45, 5 o'clock. I see 25 patients, but I push myself. And I did this in residency. I made sure that I got my charts done that day. I try to actually get my entire chart done before I see the next patient. So I see the patient and I work to engage with the patient. I touch my patients. I do all of the things, but I work to get the charts done so that I'm not there late, because I'm just a couple of things. I learned I'm not good if I don't get it done soon, then I forget. So I try to get them done because I'm just not that. And then the other thing is it's a part of I was like this before I went to West Point, but I think West Point, all about the efficiency and trying to get everything done. Something that I feel that I have to battle is my trying to be so efficient, but I'm done by 5. And so I come home and I did a second workout and before I came on with you.
That's amazing.
Or third workout.
Just to describe, people aren't seeing you. 2 things. One, you look like you're in great shape. And the second thing, and kind of a question for you. So when you're telling me the story and you're telling me mostly about your interaction with the patient and your relationship with the different people that you just described, like your face is lighting up or you're becoming a little sad when you're telling me about giving bad news. So my question for you is, you just described, I only do one thing, right? You're doing everything. So you have a great fund of knowledge about cardiology. You told me about, somebody that had a trauma. So this is like your knowledge base is broad. So obviously there's an academic piece to this, but every time you talk about your relationship with the patient, your face is lighting up. So my question for you is, if you had a pick, would you say, A, I really love the academics, that's why I love my job and I do all of these things. B, I love the relationship with the patients, or C, it's really a merging of the two. What do you think?
I would say that it's definitely a merging of the two, with probably B taking the lead over A. So I would probably say it's more 60-40 in terms of that patient relationship and then the academic curiosity. I love the academic curiosity. I joked about, I feel like we're refilling meds, we're checking labs, we're making adjustments based off of that. And that can become ho-hum. But I made a fantastic discovery on a patient about 3.5 months ago. And she had told me something when she left Nashville, Tennessee. A doctor was doing kind of an autoimmune workup. I'm like, we're going to capitalize on that. That's been 2 years. You're having these issues. We're going to do this. And lo and behold, there was just a few things that she told me. And I was like, you know what? I think you've had a leukocytoclastic vasculitis. And we came to the diagnosis, and I got her on the prednisone, and she felt better, and she lost all of this weight, and she could sleep. And I was like, God, I feel like a doctor. I made a diagnosis.
Right. That's so funny. I can't even say leukocytoclastic vasculitis. Let alone diagnose it.
But it happened. And so, first time as an attending in 5 years, I was like, well, that was pretty cool. So that academic portion of it is still there. But the other side of the relationships and trying to be academic is also the reality of the job. And that's the paperwork and the EMR that kind of brings almost this drudgery into it. So there's a balance with all of it, I think. But yeah, the patient interaction 100% is where it's at. I saw another one of my favorite patients, 3-year-old, and she wants to do push-ups with me. So we do push-ups in our visit. So it's
awesome. I'm not doing push-ups with you if I come to your office. I'll tell you that. John, I want to go back, and I just want to hear a little bit about you growing up and how you chose college. I'm going to start, before you answer the question, I am going to give back one of the quotes from your speech at the Black History Month at the medical school. And you quoted Frederick Douglass, which I thought was, and again, I'm stealing it from your lecture.
I borrowed it from Mr. Douglass.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to borrow it from Mr. Douglass also. The quote was, without struggle, there's no progress. And I think, and again, I'm setting up journey, I think that perfectly frames your journey. So with that, can you tell us, you grew up in Texas, is that right?
I did. Grew up in Midland, Texas.
So what was that like? What was it like growing up with Texas, and how did you end up at West Point?
Midland, Texas, and ending up in New York. So a hotbed of New Englanders in Midland. But I grew up, and mom and dad, John and Sandra, sister Tamika. I'm the oldest, and parents, they worked hard, worked their butts off so that we could have everything that we needed. And, grew up modest, humble. Parents worked hard. My mom retired from the post office a few years ago. My dad has worked in oil and gas because West Texas is just breaming with it. Like it's really exploded in the last few years. And I very early on knew that I wanted to do something with my life, but I didn't know what that was. And so I sought success through my academics. I sought success through my athletics. I sought success through playing the violin and viola. So my first love was basketball. I thought I was going to go to the NBA, and I'm 6 foot, and I was 6 foot in sixth grade, and I was a point guard. So I was the tallest kid on the court playing basketball as the point guard. So I knew I was going to be 6'7", 6'8". I'm looking at the picture behind you. And well, I'm still 6 foot. And so I didn't grow. And so everyone caught up. And so then I picked up football, and I became a fairly decent football player. I don't know if you've heard of the book Friday Night Lights, but there was a book that came out in 1989 about this high school team in West Texas, Odessa Permian, and a movie came out after this book, and then a TV show. Well, in the original book, that team, Odessa Permian, had a rival high school. That rival high school is the high school I went to. That rival high school, my school that I went to, would become kind of a national symbol for winning multiple state championships. Won a national championship with a running back named Cedric Benson that was leading that team. Rest his soul, he passed away a year ago. He went to the University of Texas, played in the National Football League for a long time. But so I became a pretty decent football player. And if we go back to the theme of struggle, it was not just a steady path. You're getting good grades, you're taking pre-cal, you're taking all of these different classes, and things are just moving along swimmingly. My 9th grade and my 11th grade years were probably where you would say the travails came. 9th grade, my parents had bought a new house, so we had moved and we had a new house, but we still owned our old house. And so there's this whole thing with school districts and where you live. And so where you live predicates where you go to school. Well, I had 2 houses, and one went to one high school, and if you lived in the other house, it went to the other. So my dad went to the school board to get approval to say, hey, we live here, but we own this house here. This is the school we're going to go to. Not a problem. Well, it turns out it was a problem. And it turns out that it became a major problem. It became statewide news. And so me and one of my other classmates it went all the way up to the Texas school board, and we got found ineligible. So I was deemed ineligible to play any sports. I could not participate with the orchestra in contest. And so I had to sit out for a year. So I really buckled down and focused on my school that year. I still trained, I still practiced, I still was in class, but that was a tough year because then I was living away from my mom and my sister with my dad in another house for a year. I'm in 9th grade. Like, what is going on with all of this? And I'll never forget, this is a key moment. My physical science teacher, her husband was a pilot in Vietnam who was missing in action, and she was still trying to find him. She said to me, John, I think one day you would look good at a service academy like the Air Force Academy or West Point. I had no idea what this lady was talking about. I was like, I've never heard of West Point. I'm just going to keep working on my football. That's great. So sophomore year to high school, things are moving on. By the time my 11th grade year rolls around, we're getting ready for the first game. And that Tuesday, my knee gets rolled up and I tear my ACL 4 days before the first game. So I have major reconstructive surgery as a junior in high school. So if you know anything about college recruiting, your junior year is the most important year. Your senior year is kind of like the flower on the top. They've already figured you out and they won't. So I didn't have that junior year. So I go into my senior year, and then we turn out we have this gargantuan team where we've got the number one offense in the state and the number one defense in the state. And we just had an amazing season. We didn't win state, lost one game as a starting quarterback, but I was getting recruited, and all of a sudden I think people found out about my knee. And so then the crickets were there with respect to the recruiting, and parents didn't necessarily have the money to put me through school. So it was one of those situations where like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? One day coach comes and says, "Hey, John, there's a guy here from the Army that would like to talk to you." Okay. So I go and talk to him, and it turns out his name's Ed Warner. He's been a coach at Ohio State. He's been a coach at Kansas, won national championship. And he said, "Hey, we looked at some film and we'd like to bring you up to West Point for a recruiting visit and see if you would want to join our program." I said, "Why not?" So got on a plane January 30th, 1996, and flew to New York. Second time I've only flown in my life. The previous time was in a basketball tournament only a month before. Went up to West Point and was blown away. I was like, oh my gosh, this is out there. Like, it was 3 or 4 feet of snow, but it didn't matter. You had all of these buildings and you had this history and these statues, and it was surreal. I was like, yes, I'm going to go to West Point. And so it's essentially how I ended up at West Point. So all of that goes into the, being active in school, the class president stuff, the president honor society, football team, all of the stuff. And learn. I was a violinist, and one of my mentors taught me the viola. So then I learned the viola. And so then you make all regions in there. So it's just like different things that I still had that background, even though sports was a focus. But
John, just to clarify, to me, I don't even know that I fully appreciate, but for our listeners, West Point is one of the most elite colleges in the country and has trained. Can you just tell us, a little, like, without, I know you're not a bragging type person. I've listened to you speak. I think you're one of the most modest people that I've heard speak with all of your accolades. Can you just tell for our listeners a little bit like what West Point is and what that means?
So West Point is the country's military leader academy. It's the first military academy in the country, founded in 1802, initially garrisoned by George Washington in 1776 during the Revolutionary War. And Thomas Jefferson, who originally did not want the military academy, eventually when he was president did sign it to become the military academy. And basically the school was initially built in order to provide leaders to serve the common defense and to develop engineers to build the infrastructure of the country. And so for much of its first 100 years, that's what West Point did. So if you think about the Panama Canal, led by West Point graduates, the Civil War is something. But what West Point has become is it's a very challenging school to get into, and you are looking at trying to get well-rounded people, young people, from every congressional district in the country. So it's supposed to mirror what the country looks like. And these are supposed to be young men and women that are going to lead soldiers someday in the active duty military. So 12 to 1,300 people per class, roughly 13 to 15,000 people apply for those spots. You have to receive, not only do you have to have good grades, not only do you have to be a leader, not only do you need to show that you have interest outside of academics and athletics with leadership, you also have to receive a nomination from either your congressman, your United States senator, or the vice president.
No problem. Just call them up on the phone and just ask the vice president for a letter. Not a big deal.
For nomination. So so you meet the academic criteria, and then you've got the congressional stuff, because it's Air Force Academy, a much newer academy, and the Naval Academy, which I believe was founded in 1836. So they're a sister academy, but yeah, so that's essentially, and the academies all are Division I sports, and every cadet has to play a sport, and we could get into that, and having to go through boxing and swimming and all that stuff. But
amazing.
Yeah.
So after you finished at West Point, I understand that you did some military service. Was that required?
Yes. So anyone that goes to West Point, that's you go to college, and basically it's free, but you pay that back with service. So You go to school for 4 years, and then you owe 5 years active duty, and then 4 years on the individual ready reserve. So essentially 9 years. And so that's how you pay back that service, a minimum of 5 years service. If you decide to stay beyond that, that's up to you. So I graduated and was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the field artillery. And that took me to many different places. So I eventually would end up in Kuwait in 2002 on a deployment. And then again, I ended up as a part of Operation Iraqi Freedom in Iraq in 2003. And then I was fortunate enough to return to West Point to work in the admissions department after I returned from Iraq. Yes.
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm going to pick on a couple little stories that I heard that maybe you can tell us a little bit about.
Yeah.
While we're on the topic of your deployment, you told a story in one of your lectures about a young girl that was injured in a motor vehicle accident, and maybe how that spurred, some of your interest in medicine. So tell us a little bit about that experience.
Absolutely. So, and I'm going to go back to Sue Burdett, who was the physical science teacher that said that I would look good at the military academy. So initially, I did want to go to medical school when I got to West Point. And then I got to West Point, and then I realized, holy goodness, everyone's smart. This is maybe medicine is not for me. So I actually psyched myself out of that. Lo and behold, I find myself, now I'm in Iraq, I'm in Baghdad, and I'm with my platoon. I'm a platoon leader, me and my 36 guys. We are at the Al Yarmouk Hospital, which is one of the oldest and largest hospitals. It's a teaching hospital, actually. And so we were there as part of our mission. This was our second mission. Our first mission was to secure and provide security for a propane factory after the government failed when we rolled in there initially. So this was our platoon's second mission. So we were to provide security for the hospital to make sure that people were not stealing stuff and making sure that there was control so that the hospital could go about its business. So in my job as the platoon leader, I got my guys, I was, kind of like the de facto in charge at 25 years old of this hospital and the security. And so I walk around the different departments, making sure the guys are good, making sure that all of the Iraqis feel safe. And I had an interpreter with me. And there's this one day, it was in the afternoon. I'll never forget it. And I remember hearing the ambulance come through. And so I just went to the emergency room, as I would do, to go see what kind of traumas were coming in, to see if maybe that would bring violence to the hospital that we would have to prepare for. So I went to the emergency room, and I saw a bunch of doctors in white coats standing around this little girl on the bed. And I walked in, and I saw this little girl, and she looked like she was in really bad shape, and her leg was contorted, and she was moaning, and the family was standing there. And I asked my interpreter what was going on, what he could gather. And it looked like she was just walking home from school, and a truck hit her and slammed into her. And the grandfather brought her to the hospital. I don't know what it was about the little girl, but I just felt, I just stayed there and just watched the doctors trying to assist her. And they finally moved her to a room, and they told me that she needed a higher level of care than what that hospital could provide. But because of curfews, because of census at the different hospitals, they couldn't transfer her. So I would sit with the family, and they give you, they give you prayer beads as you meet people, and if people like you. And so you're sitting there with prayer beads. So I would bring the family food if we had some leftover food, and it seemed like the family I would go there sometimes without my interpreter. So my Arabic is not very good, shukran, alaikum salams. And so I don't know, I just formed this kinship. And then on night 2, we were finally able to get an ambulance, and they could not leave unless I had signed this piece. It's like a doctor, right? Signing orders. So I signed an order for them to be allowed to go out and to transport this young girl. And it's like they swooped in, and hopefully, because I think she needed mechanical ventilation, and they didn't have it at the hospital. And so they took her away. The family was happy. Grandpa was happy. And so I'm hopeful that she got the care. The funny part of the story is a couple of days afterwards, grandfather returned, and he wanted to thank me for being there for them, and wanted to thank me for the assistance in helping his granddaughter. And so then he asked, he's like, well, you wrote a letter so that we could be out. Could you write a letter so that I can get my AK-47 back so that I can protect my farm and my cattle? I was like, sure, why not? But the point to that story is I'll never forget one of my soldiers asking me, he's like, sir, he's like, what's wrong with you? Like, why are you paying so much attention to this little girl? And I couldn't answer him. And to this day, I can't answer why I reconnected or why I connected with that little girl. But the point is, my interpreter, I remember a couple of weeks later, and he says, Lieutenant Thurman, you're different ever since that little girl left. And I don't know if I was different because I was thinking about what I couldn't do to help her, or what I could do to help her. I think I felt helpless, and I didn't want to feel helpless. So that earlier thought of medical school when I was getting to West Point kind of entered my mind as thinking, you know what, maybe this is something that I need to do. So that experience in Iraq, I think, is what rekindled something that was laying dormant.
I love that story. And I totally think what's in your heart is in your heart, but sometimes it takes that understanding that you could do more if you had more knowledge. That I think a lot of the people that we've interviewed have a similar sentiment. And I think that's amazing. I think that's just very deep. So you have these experiences, you finish your tour, you come back to the United States. And can you tell us what happened from there and how you ended up deciding that you wanted to go to medical school?
So I returned to West Point and I get engaged, and I'm engaged to Audrey, my lovely bride, and we're living apart. So she's a student at K-State. I'm at West Point. So now I'm working as faculty, working with the football team, doing admissions work, and it's everything is good. And you remember I had the knee injury when I was a junior in high school, and my knee is good. I played 4 years of college football, didn't have any issues at West Point. 2 deployments, total of 4 deployments in 24 months, no issues. One day I think it's the admissions department is going to play the history department in Ultimate Frisbee. And my boss says, Captain Thurman, you're playing. Sir, I don't want to play. Captain Thurman, you're playing. Yes, sir, I'm playing. So I in my typical fashion, I go for like a 2-mile run to get warmed up and get lathered. I get cleats. I go down there, and I'm just, I know myself. I get very competitive. And so I get competitive, and I time a jump on the Frisbee trying to snatch it out of the air. I come down and I destroy my right knee again. This time I destroyed it worse than I did the first time. So this was a posterior lateral corner injury. So a posterior lateral corner is basically what they call the career in there. So I tore my ACL, tore my LCL by like 3 tendons. The common peroneal nerve was damaged. I almost severed it. So an 8-hour surgery actually ensued, which then led to 2 more surgeries, with a 4th surgery being a shoulder surgery in the next 2 years. So my plans of what I was going to do after I left my West Point job kind of got put on hold with 4 surgeries in 2 years. So the reason that's important is that my admissions job was going to be up, and I developed a pretty good rapport with the orthopedic surgeons. There's this fellowship that's at West Point. It's a sports medicine fellowship, the John Fagan Sports Medicine Fellowship. Dr. Fagan recently passed away. He's a pioneer in orthopedics and just a great man. And so I was able to go and work with them for 2 years as I recovered from the surgeries and the injuries. And in that time, because of the severity of my injury, I actually developed foot drop. My nerve went to sleep after surgery, and so I couldn't walk, and I had to wear an ankle foot orthosis. So this led me going to Walter Reed. Went to Walter Reed to go receive care with the physical medicine and rehabilitation team, also going to get EMGs. These are electromyograms and all kinds of fun stuff. But this journey is where the book turned open. And my wife can tell this story probably better than I, but we were with residents, and the residents were seeing me before the attending came in. And it was just a cool experience. Like they were asking about me, but they were also asking me about my wife, who was my fiance at that point. And we were like, that's weird. We never had doctors talking to you too. And so they asked me what I was thinking, what I was going to do. And I was like, I don't know. I thought about being a doctor. And they said, well, have you ever heard of a DO? And I was like, no. was like, we're all DOs and maybe it's something you should look into. And I was like, okay, but how do I do that? He's like, well, you should check out this book called The DOs by Norman Gebbets. And I was like, all right, I'll read that up. And we just had this really nice experience. It just felt like there was maybe a little bit more to me than just my knee injury and the fact that I couldn't walk. They wanted to know other aspects of my life. And that was the first time I'd really felt like that through this experience of having all these surgeries. So I got the book and I read the book. I was like, whoa, this is kind of cool. So maybe that's what I can be. And so I'll never forget. I came home one day and I just decided, you know what? I'm going to medical school. Like, there's just something going on. I'm doing orthopedic research. I had this experience in Iraq with Fatma. And we just met these DOs. There's a guy here who's the program director of the West Point. So each graduating class at West Point, they take 1% of the graduating class goes into medicine. And so they have a director. And I met the director. Turns out the director is a DO. He's a Vietnam era DO. And we hit it off really well. And I was like, well, because West Point has such a good curriculum, I actually only needed 4 classes in order to make up for not being a chemistry major or a pre-med. You know, I'm an engineer, systems engineer. So I decided I wanted to come to med school, and my wife was like, "Are you crazy? Like, I dropped out of school because you had these surgeries, and so you're going to get 2 degrees before I get 1." And I'm like, "No, we can figure out a place where we can both go to a place where we can go to school together." And Kirksville actually turned out to be that place. But yeah, that is just a whole strange events, getting hurt, going to war, and somehow I ended up in osteopathic medical school.
Okay. So again, the whole story is amazing. And outside of the fact that, you know, your life is up until this point has had twists and turns, and it seems like the universe is kind of directing you towards Kirksville, Missouri. Would you say the one piece of advice that you would give to medical students is don't play ultimate Frisbee? Right. Okay. We'll leave that.
Yeah. Don't be a Division I quarterback and then like not be able to play college Frisbee, because I was not very good at it. Everyone laughs at me. I don't know why they laugh.
I'm sorry, John. Okay, so anyway, so you end up in Kirksville, which is the founder school of osteopathic medicine. And can you tell me a little bit about what your experience was like at Kirksville and the people that you met there?
It all starts with the people. So I told you that I met the program director for West Point. And he said, "Hey, you know, there's a lady that's coming from Kirksville. She's a recruiting lady. Would you like to meet her?" I was like, "Absolutely." Her name is Andy Jackson. And she heard a little bit about my story, and she came to the house to me and Audrey and I's house. And her husband was with her on this trip because there was the East Coast trip, and she met, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, you'd be a great non-traditional candidate for this upcoming class." And I was like, "Hey," you know, she's like, "Would you like to, you know, visit?" So I did everything. I went through ACOMAS. I did everything that I was supposed to do. And I was working, you know, full-time as an Army officer. And then I was going to the community college on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And then going to New York City on the weekends for an MCAT prep class. It was great. Couldn't drive. It was non-weight bearing after surgery. But Kirksville wanted me. And there's something about it being the founding school, West Point being there's something about schools that have history and tradition like that. You know, I tell anybody, if you get accepted, you go where you're wanted. And I always felt like I was wanted. And there was something about the people. So we're talking about Dr. Wilson. I look up to Dr. Wilson. I think I've told her that she's my hero. She's one of the, you know, she was the president of her class, you know, graduated at the top of her class, female DO, just like power. And now she's the dean, and I would do anything for her. And there's just something about how there's an atmosphere that the people at Kirksville do matter. And your classmate, they try to build a class, I think, around this theme of, you know, you've got leaders, you've got scholars, you've got kind of a mix of everything. And it's just the faculty cares about the students. Everyone from the faculty to the staff to the environmental services people, to the people that do the telecommunications. Like I go back to Kirksville and, oh, John, and I'm like, hey, what's going on, Dean? And I mean, it's just like, well, we're watching you on Facebook, seeing your, and it's been 13 years and I go back and it's like going home. And there's something about going to the gym there and I see Dan Martin. The experience, it's like that in real time. And it's like that as an alumnus. And there's just something about the feeling there because you're in rural Missouri when you go to Kirksville. And the interesting thing about that is one of my residency colleagues, my best friend in residency, she went to the Chicago comp and she was interested in Kirksville because she loved the academics that were at Kirksville and she wanted to do it, but she just couldn't do the whole Kirksville, Missouri coming from Chicago. And I get that. But Kirksville is a great place to be, to study and to focus on what you need to focus on, which is becoming a DO.
That's awesome. That's great. John, so you're at Kirksville, finishing up medical school. How did you decide on your specialty? And how did you decide you wanted to be a family practice doc?
By spending my third and fourth year in Wichita, Kansas. I originally wanted to do pediatric oncology, but then I started looking at my age and started looking at how many years of residency. And I did not go through medical school. I went through it on my own dime because of my injuries. I was medically separated from the Army. So that means I had to take out loans and all of that. And so now I'm 10 years older than all my classmates. And I'm just thinking of 6 years of residency. I just don't know if I'm ready for that. So I went to Wichita and I found out that Wichita, Kansas is the birthplace of family medicine in the country. And the Wesley is there and Via Christi, super strong family medicine residencies. I think Via Christi and Loma Linda out in California are like always the top two of three of the family medicine residencies. And I just got bit by the bug because they're training family docs in Wichita to go out into rural Kansas and to be the only doctor in a 100, 180, 200 mile radius. So they're doing not only family medicine, but they're doing EGDs and colonoscopies. They're trained to do that. They're doing C-sections. So I was just like, oh, this is awesome. This is, like they told me to read the book, The DOs, but there's another book that I read called Doc. And it's about this guy in the Midwest and he was the doc and he did everything. So it was hard to be in that environment and not say, hey, that's the kind of doctor I want to be. Cause then it's taking me back to my roots. Fodman, I can help, right? I can do colonoscopy as a family doc. It was an overwhelming opportunity. And that's what led me to family medicine and took me away from pediatric oncology.
So when you were looking at residency programs, things are different now, everything's under sort of one umbrella, the ACGME, but did you do an osteopathic family practice residency, allopathic? Did you look at both? And how did you make a decision on what program you're going to choose? And where did you do it?
I actually did a dual. So my program was actually an MD-DO program. And it was a really difficult decision because I loved the programs in Wichita and I wanted to stay there. And I believe they wanted me to stay there, but I knew that we wanted to live in a city, and the MacNeal Family Medicine residency was this opportunity that it was like the perfect marriage. So there's 12 residents per class. And it turns out my intern year, there were 8 DOs and 4 MDs. Which they hadn't had, like they'd had, the other way around. But the fact that we had such a strong DO representation in that particular program was one of the reasons that I wanted to go to MacNeal in Chicago. And then it turned out that it's the oldest family medicine residency in Illinois. So it goes back to this theme. And Dr. Davis Yang is the program director. We just actually, this past December 2019, celebrated our 50th anniversary as a residency. So you think about 50 years of producing DOs. This was just a place for me. And so I could still actively use my DO skills and build upon. And I think the reason why I still use my skills is a lot of what I learned in Chicago at MacNeal.
So it sounds like amazing training, And it's so interesting, I live in New York, and we've interviewed a lot of people that are really focused on specialties, but the breadth of knowledge of a good family practice doctor and the ability to do all of those things, I think is incredible, just incredible. So you finish your residency and then you decide you're going to look for a job. And obviously you've lived in a few different places. And I assume
Right.
You're married at that point. Your wife has some input into where she'd like.
Lots of input.
But lots of input, of course. Happy wife, happy life, right? So how did you pick a job? What was it like applying for a job? And how did you decide where you ultimately wanted to set up practice?
So at this point, when I decided to go to medical school, everything basically in my life with Audrey became about me. And so finally we got to the point where, okay, we're graduating residency. Now it needs to be about me. And she really loves Chicago. My wife is a CPA working for Deloitte, which is the largest accounting firm in the world in Chicago, like right next door to the Sears Tower. She loves her career. She doesn't want to leave. So we're looking at jobs in Chicago and a reasonable drive radius around Chicago. So we interviewed in Indiana, Wisconsin, suburbs of Chicago. And then this recruiter from Burlington, Iowa called me, said, hey, I saw that you put your CV on, and would you be interested in us? And they were definitely outside of our radius. It's about a 4-hour drive from Chicago to here. And I said, well, this is kind of like out of what we're looking for, but I can go listen and hear what they have to say. And so I went and I just found this practice that was founded in 1990 by a couple of docs that have grown into 15 docs. And amazing practice opportunity with 3 former Iowa Family Physicians of the Year in this practice. And I was like, oh, this just seems like an amazing opportunity. We're going to be having a healthy living clinic, a healthy living kitchen, and they're starting off a new practice, and I could be helping to start that. And so my wife was going to say, hey, you can do what you want, but I'm still going to be in Chicago. So we were looking at how we were going to do the commuting thing. And so she signed off on it. And we just felt not only was it the best opportunity, but in all honesty, in all full transparency, is it almost in family medicine world, the further you get away from the city, the financial incentives are greater. It's just the truth, right? So now we've got a lot of debt that I need to pay back. And this really provided an opportunity to be a part of a great practice and also to get our debt down sooner than later. So it was an amazing opportunity.
One personal question on this. So your wife, and again, just for our listeners, a lot of pre-meds and medical students that are really, medicine focused. Deloitte Touche, as far as I know, is like a big CPA firm. So your wife is real deal CPA. She's not.
Yep.
And my wife is, with all respect, my wife is a housewife. She stays home and takes care of the kids. I think she has one of the hardest jobs in the world. But
100%.
100%. But from a in the workforce job, your wife has a really high level demanding position. So what ended up happening with her when you took that position, and how did she feel about that?
So we were able, I think it was, so she stayed on and we did the commuting thing. We kept an apartment in Chicago and she would work here and then she would commute back there. So we did that for about a year and a half. And it wasn't necessarily anything to do with her. Things just happened in her job that she felt like, you know what, I think it's just time for me to take a break, because I'll give you. So you remember when the new guidelines for residents came out and they couldn't work more than 80 hours a week?
Yes.
My wife was working more hours than I was.
Wow.
So there was a couple weeks when she put in 120-hour weeks, and that's not sustainable, both of our careers. And so finally she made the decision that she was going to basically do her own thing. And so she left. And so she hasn't worked there. She hasn't worked for Deloitte in 3 years. So she's on her own, and she's much happier. She's here. We're not commuting, and we kind of figured that thing out. So yeah, things are great.
That's awesome. So everything worked out. That's perfect. Your story is spectacular. Your resume, in my opinion, spectacular. But can you tell us, if you could think of one thing that you really feel, one attribute that has really contributed the most to your success, and we kind of ask, what do you think your superpower is?
Oh, I, I think the one thing that I'm able to do is I'm able to embrace the process. And I think I have an ability to get very comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I feel like if you can't elevate yourself to be persistently consistent, then I think that's going to be something that's a little more challenging to overcome. But I always tell people, you've got to become best friends with Mr. Perseverance and Mr. Humility.
I think you, just in the last half hour, 40 minutes that we've spoken, you have definitely demonstrated that. I have no doubt. How do you, John, how do you maintain your work-life balance, and what do you do for fun? Obviously, you told me you work out a good amount and you're in good shape. Is that exercise, or what do you do to kind of de-stress?
So my de-stressor is definitely exercising. I've tried to maintain my fitness since my college days, and nutrition. So I've not had meat in 2020. So this has been something new. My wife has always been on the vegetarian path, so I decided to embark on that. So discovering new things with intermittent fasting and in eating plant-based diet and exercising is our thing. But the biggest thing that keeps me going is travel. I think my experiences in Iraq, I didn't want to travel. My wife wanted to travel. I was like, I've deployed. First time I leave the country, I went to war, and it was just like, I don't want to do that anymore. And she's like, come on, we got it. And finally we took a trip. We went to Ireland. She said, well, go to Ireland. They speak English there. And I went to Ireland, and I fell in love. And 41 countries later, we're just, travel is a thing we do. 2019 was an amazing year for travel. 2019 was a seminal year. We actually, her aunt and uncle were in Iraq. They were in the Iraqi Kurdistan. So we traveled to Iraq last year. We went to South Korea twice, and I knew the commander that's on the DMZ. We were able to stay in the DMZ and see a little bit of North Korea last year. We were in Japan. We were in India. Yeah, 2019 was a great year. So travel is how I decompress, and it's kind of my new thing with the whole globe thing you see there.
I see that.
A global citizen says, yeah, I think we left the country 6 or 7 times last year.
I listened to again, I'm going to go back to that lecture that you gave for Black History Month. And you spoke a little bit about Operation Osteopathic Service in Haiti. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So Operation Osteopathic Service was a service project that Audrey and I developed when I was a class president. And I just didn't want to be like, class president, we don't do anything. So I wanted to find a way to bridge bringing the students of Kirksville to the community. And so what we did was we basically engineered a huge service project that would take the students all different places of downtown Kirksville and basically do a large cleanup. And then at the end of the day, we would have a class barbecue. And that was, we got the local news station involved in, and they were able to get donations, and we were able to get supplies from the Home Depot. And we got the community to be invested into the school, and then the students to show an appreciation to the city. And so, yeah, we started Operation Osteopathic Service. And the Haiti thing actually happened with my wife. My wife met a couple of young ladies. One's a nurse at my hospital, and they were doing missions to Haiti after the earthquake. And there was a gentleman who happens to be a West Point graduate from Iowa that was a wrestler that became an orthopedic surgeon. Wow. That's been in Thailand. It's been in some of these really crazy countries, like doing great work, mission work. And after the earthquake, they adopted a young boy, junior, who just graduated high school through all of this. But no, they started Love Takes Root, and Love Takes Root is an organization that helped. They've got an orphanage because there's so many orphans after the earthquake, but there's also a medical clinic And he also is able to go down there and do surgeries, and he's trying to form a residency there. So my wife volunteered there twice. And then I was finally able to go and volunteer and go take care of patients in Haiti with her group, Love Takes Group. She was actually using her background with her CPA knowledge to help run the business side of the not-for-profit company. So we've been able to actually work together using her skill set and my skill set to go and volunteer.
And then you also mentioned, again, just on the lines of all that you do to give back, something about a scholarship fund for minority students. Can you tell us about that?
Okay, so this is something that's actually really, really, really important, because minority students in medical school is something that we're working toward. So we have a diversity and inclusion vice president. So the gentleman named Clint Normore, and he started the diversity and inclusion office at A.T. Still University, which KCUM falls underneath. And I got elected or selected to be on the Kirksville Osteopathic Alumni Association board, these acronyms. So I, as a board member, I've been working with Clint ever since he came, and we've been wanting to talk to potential minority applicants and trying to work and, talking to people and helping them work through the process and just creating visibility, someone to reach out and talk to. And finally, I thought, you know what, we need to get Clint. We need to bring Clint to one of our KOA board meetings and have him explain his vision so that we can get the word out on what we're actually trying to do for our minority students. And he came and he delivered this presentation, and the president at the time was blown away. And so we all talked in real time and said, hey, let's start an endowment to help this diversity inclusion. And so me, Dave, and Christine Perry, another member of the board, formed, and we started an endowment to help with the diversity and inclusion for minorities at A.T. Still University. And still working with Clint on different programs and trying to get build up more of a pipeline of trying to get people, hey, this is what osteopathy is. This is what you can do, and trying to create new bridges to bring in more minority applicants. And the endowment's been fun. And now, now I'm president-elect of the KOA board. And so now I'm going to be able to hopefully do more things next year when I'm the president guy. But yeah, Clint Normore, and we're actually, there's a KCOM graduate that his name is David Roney. He is a general surgeon. This young man is sharp. He's a Naval Academy grad that played basketball. He is from the streets of LA. You talk about a guy that has a story, and you talk about a guy that's a leader as a surgeon right now in the Navy. David Roney is the guy. So now I've got David helping with Clint. And so we're just trying to foster some energy and trying to develop more minority interests. But it doesn't start with people in high school. You got to start when they're, in elementary school and junior high, and start planting seeds. And so that's the challenge there, because you had mentioned, it's not something natural. Being a doctor, like my science teacher, hey, West Point. And I'm like, I don't know what West Point is.
Right.
Now you're going to talk about med school. No one that looked like me, no Black people that look like me going to med school. I didn't have that. So for people to have access, actually one of the guys that I was in Wichita with as third and fourth year med student told me this amazing story about a guy that's trying to get into med school that I'm going to actually reach out to after we're done here. He's didn't think he had the grades, took the MCAT, wasn't good enough, so he went and got a master's, and he's teaching, full-time dad. He's studying for the MCAT and applying. He's a dad, and he's trying to get in, but he just doesn't have that direction. So like, man, I wish this is someone I could have gotten to know earlier in the process, because the lack of minorities is evident. At Kirksville, at least from my experience. And so we're really trying to build that diversity.
So John, first of all, thank you so much for everything that you've shared with us. You're amazing. And I think this has been great. If there's a minority student, let's say there's a pre-medical student, minority student,
Absolutely.
and you could give them already you've given them a ton of advice through your journey, but if you could just give a little bit of advice to a minority student that was listening, what would you say to them? Pre-med, thinking about osteopathic school specifically.
Right. So, okay. So, thinking about whether you want to be an MD or whether you want to be a DO, in my opinion, that's just the vehicle to becoming a physician. So obviously I'm biased towards DOs, but do not close any doors because so school is going to be in Kirksville or it's going to be in some other rural part of the country. So first keep an open mind to where you can go, because you never know what that can turn into. The other thing is reach out and try to see if potential schools you have graduates that are willing to talk to you or willing to mentor you. Or if you're pre-med, ask your program directors, or if you're a science major or you're pre-med, ask them if they know anyone at the med schools that you can connect them with. Because like we have our diversity and inclusion office, Clinton reaches out to us all the time about prospective students, especially with the pandemic, people that were going to start this year, but now they're being deferred. I wrote a young lady this morning that's, just check in to see, hey, how are you doing? Is there anything that I can do? But you can start doing that as a pre-med, or even when you're a senior in high school. If you don't know anything about it, just, hey, reach out and talk to someone at the office of a school. Like, do a Google search. It's not that hard, and people will reach out to you. But keep your mind open. Reach out. Try to seek out people that have graduated. Seek people like myself. We're willing to do that. That's giving back because it's important. And ask questions. Don't be afraid, because I think this young man, he didn't allow his letters. He didn't waive that access. So, if that's something, if I would have been working with, I was like, no, you want people to, you want to close it. You want to leave that open. So I just think there's different things that people don't know about. And I think that lack of knowledge, if only you just ask, if only you just go to your program directors at your schools and just ask them what is the potential of what is out there, and they can help you with that, and they can help attract the Clinton Normores of the world to get in touch with people like myself. So just don't think, oh, I can't do that. Of course you can do it. Trust me. Dude that can't play ultimate frisbee, if I can get into med school.
Listen, don't sell yourself short. Obviously, you're being totally modest, but I think your point is super well taken. It's sort of, you just have to, again, if you're a minority student, there are leaders and role models like yourself that are willing to help, and they just need to look for those people and mentorship, and you'll help them someone like you will help them get direction if they need it.
Right. But it is. I mean, but we have to acknowledge that it's a truly uphill battle, because you start looking at finances, and if you're coming from a neighborhood that's in the south side of Chicago, that's going to be a challenge. It's just a reality, and it's a reality that trying to get people to understand how the loans do work, and not to be afraid of that, because I can tell you, I was afraid. I didn't have any debt before I went to med school. And then I inherited a tremendous amount of debt that I will say that we will have paid off in 6 years. So we've been very aggressive with that, even with our travels. But that's something not to be afraid of. That's something to understand. It's a part of the process. So I think financial barriers, whether you're coming from lower socioeconomic status and going into this world, you also need to work with financial planners so that you can learn how to manage money and be smart with money. So there's a lot of different things, but I just think when you don't know, you're scared. And so when you don't know things, it's just like the fear of the unknown. And we've got to somehow figure out how to knock that wall down.
All right, John, thank you again for that advice. I think that's amazing. John, the last question I have for you, which is kind of our grand finale question, is what is the best piece of advice that you got throughout your education? Obviously, you were in high school playing instruments, playing football, West Point, then Kirksville, and going through tours in Iraq and the Middle East and all of these different places. But my question is, but just good advice that you were given as you were going through your journey that you remember and that you think would be valuable to pass on to other students?
So I want to give, so I just want people to understand this. So my grades getting into college were great. My SAT score was not. My ACT score was fair. My MCAT score was poor. So I had good things working for me, but then I had some major things not working for me. And I graduated from West Point. I graduated from the Kirksville College of Osteopathic Medicine because don't quit. And my high school football coach gave me a poem when I went off to West Point, and he wrote on there, to one of the toughest rebels. And there's a poem about not quitting, no matter what the circumstances are. And that thing has been with me for the last 24 years. It's on my wall. I look at it every day when I go to work. And it was with me when I was in Iraq. It was with me when I was in Kuwait. Don't quit, because you know that you can do it. And it goes back to something I said earlier about being persistently consistent, consistently persistent, and embracing the process. And I think not quitting is embracing the process, recognizing that this is going to be a challenge. You should embrace that challenge. You should get comfortable with the fact that it's going to be uncomfortable, and that's how you grow. And so that goes back to the Frederick Douglass quote. And I think that's what's been with me, because the first time I heard that, I was a sophomore in high school. Without struggle, there can be no progress. And so I think that's probably the biggest piece of advice. If you can understand and appreciate that it's not just going to be, roses and, my parents are just going to pave this pathway and it's just going to be easy. And, you get that first C when your physics class at West Point, and you're like, oh, or you get that first D and you're like, okay, I need to step my game up. Sometimes you need that to figure out how you need to study. Or you get to med school and you haven't, you've been an Army officer for the last 7 years and you haven't been in school, and you're struggling because you're like, whoa, biochemistry, we're about to get 6 semester in 3 weeks, and you're trying to figure out the Krebs cycle and all of this tricyclic. And so I think getting comfortable with that and understanding that that's a part of it and that's how you get your success. I learned that a long time ago, and it always seems to never fail me.
John, again, thank you so much for your time. I can't tell you how much we appreciate it.
Thank you. Hey, this is really cool that Dr. Wilson reached out to me, because this is just your enthusiasm and passion about DO or do not. I got that right away. I'm Yoda all the way. I mean, it's true, right? Try or do not. There is no try. I mean, I think that goes back to everything I'm saying. Do or do not, there is no try.
John, you're the best. Again, you're a total inspiration to me, and I'm sure to everyone else that's going to hear this interview. So thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Take care, John.
This concludes our episode of Do or Do Not. Send all inquiries, comments, suggestions, and even let us know if there's someone you want us to interview to doordonotpodcast@gmail.com. Don't forget to like us on Facebook at Do or Do Not Podcast for updates. If you enjoyed our podcast, please share it with your classmates and administration. We have plenty of more interviews lined up, and we're excited to share them with you. This is Tian Yu Shea. Thank you guys so much for listening to Do or Do Not.